Hey Pokemon TCG enjoyers, Kieran here with the ultimate Gardevoir EX guide. I've been playing this deck a lot at League Cups. I've loved it a lot. I think it's one of the best decks in the format, super consistent, so hopefully I can help you learn a lot alongside our guest today. So just to go over the agenda for this video, what we're going to cover, we're going to start with our introduction of our guest. We're going to go over the different builds of Gardevoir, so how Tord plays the deck, the Australian list, how my guest Rowan plays the deck. Then we're going to go over some potential cards to include in the deck, cards that aren't auto-include in every build, so we're going to go over the pros and cons of each. Then we're going to kind of go into playing Greninja right now. Since Mew EX just came out, it's a bit dangerous for Gardevoir to have that on the bench since they can copy Moonlight Shuriken, so we're kind of going to discuss if it should still be in the deck, how to play around it the best. Then we're going to really deep dive into all of the deck's matchups, how to play it, what to look for. And at the end, we're just going to finish off with our conclusions, the strengths and weaknesses of the deck, and talk a little bit of how you can avoid tying in best of 3. So without further ado, super excited to introduce our guest. One of the best Canadian players, one of the best young players in the game, just one of the best players in the game. Please welcome Rowan Stavenow. So Rowan, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction?
Yeah, my name's Rowan. You can see I have some accomplishments. I was a world champion in 2015. I won Hartford Regionals last year. As a player, I tend to gravitate towards decks with really strong draw engines. So you saw like the Mew Genesect deck, that was really good. I used to like Zoroark GX back in the day. So I really love the Kirlia engine. I feel like I can draw a lot of cards. Gives me a lot of chance to outplay my opponents. So I'm really excited to talk about this deck today.
Great, yeah, thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate that. So let's get into the Guardy builds, what is currently seeing play. And I just kind of want to get your opinion on the different ways Gardevoir is being played and kind of what differentiates them, what's good about them, and what the trade-off is. So let's start with how Tord plays Gardevoir. So this is his list from Pittsburgh. It's pretty similar to his Worlds list. I'd say the big callouts here is Tord plays Lumineon, he plays Forest Sealstone, he plays Lost Vacuum, and he plays the Double Reversal with the Mirage Step Kirlia. So what are your thoughts on Tord's build of the deck, and what do you think it does really well?
Great. So until Worlds, I was playing a very different list. But when I saw his Worlds list, a lot of it just makes sense. The biggest callouts for me that are just brilliant are the Mirage Step and Double Reversal. It just lets you set up insane board states and have a really powerful turn 3 in exchange for having a weaker turn 2. So it's getting a bit less greedy and having a more consistent setup in the long game.
Yeah.
What I don't like about his list is I don't like the Lumineon and the Forest Sealstone. I think it's kind of awkward how you can only use Forest Sealstone if you have a V in play, because often those V Pokemon are liabilities and you actually don't want them in play. So I don't like that, but otherwise his list was brilliant and I applied a lot of his ideas to mine.
Cool. Yeah, I think later we're going to talk about the Forest Sealstone and the Lumineon in detail, so let's save that for later, but I think that's a good overview.
Welcome.
The next build, I think this is probably the more unique one. This is how the Australians like to play Gardevoir. So they play Double Zacian, Double Forest, and they don't even play Reversal. They just play 12 basic energies with Double Worker as well. So what do you think about this approach to Gardevoir, and what are the trade-offs you're making when you play the deck this way?
I think this build's super cool. I looked at it a few times. It's kind of the opposite idea. Instead of going for a really consistent turn 3 and a really weak turn 2, you're just going for a really strong turn 2. You want to candy into Gardevoir, get done a bunch of trades, and probably even attack with Cresselia on your second turn of the game. And I think this would be really good in a format where you need to be more aggressive. But I think right now you can afford to just take turn 2 off and just Mirage Step.
Yeah, I think the big thing I'm just thinking about this list is they don't play Reversal. And I found in a lot of my games, Reversal energy is super important. It allows you to attack with Arcana without a Gardevoir in play. It allows you to not take knockouts on stuff like a Charizard EX or a Lugia V-Star. Yes. So I think this build isn't super well positioned in the meta, but like you're saying, if we move towards a faster format where you don't need to take really big knockouts, I actually really like this build. So let's finish off. This is how you're currently playing the deck. I've been using your list at League Cups. I really like it. I'd say it's probably the most straightforward way to play Gardevoir. You're playing 4 Iono, 3 Boss, no Forest, just high counts of everything. So kind of explain your approach to the deck and how you built this.
Yep. So my approach to this deck is similar to my approach to Pokemon in general, where I just want all my cards to be useful as often as possible. So you see me leave out cards like Pal Pad, because sometimes you just want to play Boss's Orders on turn 3 and you have a Pal Pad and that does nothing. So I just play 3 Boss's Orders, 4 Ionos, I think a big call out is that I play Temple of Sinnoh. I think that's really important for the Lugia matchup. We'll talk about that later. Um, but yeah, I think those are that was my approach to the deck. I like playing 3 Fog Crystals. That's kind of like the one thing you could cut if you wanted some cool cards. But yeah, that's my list.
I think it's good. Yeah, I've been really enjoying the 3 Fog Crystal. Like, I just think early game, obviously that's a Ralts, it's a Mew, but like later in the game when you're really pushing for the big knockouts, especially around turn 3, just having an item that can turn into an energy is just really cool. So now that we've kind of like gone over the decks, I kind of want to go over a lot of the cards that aren't staple to every build. They're kind of like in some versions and some not, and I kind of want to go over your thoughts of why you should include it or why you shouldn't. So just to start off, let's start off with like the newest card, Mew EX from 151. I've seen a couple of the Japanese lists playing that. Give me your thoughts on Mew, like how it could be useful in the deck, and maybe why you wouldn't also include it in the deck.
Yeah, okay. So I think this card, a lot of great things about it. As far as the attack, the 2 best things are you can copy one-shot attacks. So things like Tina, Tyranitar, maybe a Charizard if they're low on prizes. That's super good. And then obviously copying Greninja to take 2 prizes on small Pokemon. So I think this card looks really good when you think of it that way. But in reality, Gardevoir already has ways to one-shot anything with Arcana and Zacian. And I don't think you actually get to copy Greninja very often. I think, Lost Box can just put down a Manaphy. I think I could see some utility in Mirror getting to copy their Greninja. I think that is probably the biggest application. Mm-hmm. But I just don't think I would get enough use out of this card for it to be worth it, because it's a big liability.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts on playing this in a large, like, regional? So, like, in my head, like, the Mew EX is very strong when your opponent doesn't know you play it. Like, if you don't know your opponent doesn't know you're playing this, like, you can catch them off guard, like Moonlight Shuriken, but, like, I feel like as you get deeper into tournaments, like, everyone's going to know you're playing this card as well, and you kind of lose the surprise factor, which then they're just going to start benching Manaphy, or not benching Greninja at all. So, to me, I think the card is a little bit too many drawbacks, and I don't think there's anything super strong to copy just yet that the deck can't already do on its own.
I think this card would be great in a best of 1 format as well. Maybe at some League Cups, you can surprise your opponent, copy their Greninja, and kind of just win the game with a move like that. But yeah, especially in best of 3, you wouldn't get to do this to your opponent 2 times, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. I think just one final call out too, like Restart's like such a great ability, but Gardevoir always has a fairly large hand size, and you already have like Kirlia and Arcana, so I don't really think you're getting much out of that part of the card. So let's move on to Mirage Step Kirlia. So I think this has almost become standard ever since Tord played this at Worlds. I really like this card. I was someone who initially like didn't really think it was that good, but after playing with it a lot, I actually like think this should be staple. Can you kind of explain like why this card is so strong?
Yeah, so I originally didn't like this card either, because usually I'm like, well, I just want as many of the same card as possible, consistency, all that. But the utility of this card is amazing. Back at NAIC, when Arceus Dralodon Umbreon was one of the best decks, one of the issues was they kept lost zoning all your stuff. But with Mirage Step, you could just have so many Kirlias and Candies. You honestly didn't care when your Ralts went to the lost zone. So that was originally why I thought it was so brilliant. But the more I played with it, like the more I realized, like against Miraidon, Lugia, even Gardevoir Mirror, against Mew VMAX, these decks where you don't actually need to attack on turn 2 to win the prize trade, because Shining Arcana is so powerful and can trade 1 to 2, 1 to 3 even with VMAX Pokemon. This card really just sets you up for the whole game. Yeah. It's really good. And it also bails you out of like crappy starts where you have 2 Ralts, and then on turn 2 you can only get out 1 Kirlia. Oh, now you got 4.
Yeah. That's what I found I've loved a lot. Like sometimes I get opening hands where I'm starting like 1 Ralts and I only have like a Level Ball or a Fog Crystal. I'm like, I just check. I'm like, as long as Kirlia is in the deck, I'm like, I actually can just like pass on my first turn, and then my second turn is just super strong. I'm gonna get 4 Kirlias into play. And like you're saying, like whenever you're playing a deck that has 2 prizers, you can afford to go down even like 2 prizes, because the Shining Arcana Gardevoir are just such efficient attackers for trading. And we'll cover that in some of the matchups, but I think it's a really strong card. It ups consistency and just makes your board stay strong. So let's talk about the next card is Lost Vacuum. So I think initially people were like, oh, like why wouldn't you just play another stadium? Stadiums have more utility. So can you kind of explain like why you would play Lost Vacuum instead of just playing another stadium?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of the stadiums are kind of where you really have room to pick what you like. But for the vacuum specifically, I find it really useful against Miraidon. You can pop off Big Charm sometimes. Tools like Box of Disaster are really annoying in Mew VMAX. So like a lot of the time you will just have to use this to bump path, but some of the times you get that bonus utility that you wouldn't have otherwise. Another thing that comes up with Lost Vacuum is that you can Lost Vacuum away a Collapse Stadium in order to put your own Collapse Stadium down to get rid of your Gardevoir EX. And that's a super powerful play. A lot of people don't see that, and it is like a fairly specific example, but it is important, in my opinion, to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think let's talk about that later when we get to the Gardevoir Mirror, because I think Collapse Stadium is a card that a lot of people don't understand how to use to its full potential, and I think, like you're saying, Vacuum just really enables it, so that's a really great call out. So moving on, let's talk about Worker. So Worker is, like, again, another anti-stadium card. It does take up your supporter for the turn, and normally we do see this card comboed with Palpad. So when would you play Worker, and when would you just stick with more stadiums in your deck?
I think it makes a lot of sense if you have Palpad, because it can allow you to have another stadium bump against some of these decks that might be playing 4 paths. When I was testing this card, I felt like it was kind of like a crappy research and a crappy stadium out, but it was both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I thought about it. So it's a good card. Again, you can do the thing where you Worker the Collapsed and play your Collapsed. So maybe if you're not playing Vacuum, you could play this card. I do like this card.
Yeah, it feels like mediocre whenever you play it, but like it serves its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just like a very like fair average card. So yeah, let's talk about Palpad next then. So I found Palpad in any deck, like it's a super strong late game card, but you're always sacrificing a little bit of your upfront consistency. So what are your thoughts about Palpad in Gardevoir?
Over time, I've gone a bit more fond of this card. It's still not in my list. Obviously, you can play more. It lets you cut down on your supporters. So maybe if you wanted to add some kind of tech to your deck, you could cut an Iono, cut a boss, put in Palpad, and then you get another tech. Maybe you want to toss in a Worker. Maybe you want to play Mew EX, something like that. It does also let you get extra Ionos, which is important against Lost Box, because sometimes 4 Ionos, like sometimes you really just want to Iono 6 times every turn of the game. So that's also more utility. It's just the trade-off, right? Consistency versus power level and what you tend to gravitate towards.
Yeah, I agree. I think over a large tournament like regionals, like I might value the consistency a little bit more, but honestly, like to do really well in a tournament, you kind of have to run well. So maybe the little extra power that Palpad gives you might be worth it. So yeah, next, sticking with the supporter trend, let's talk about Lumineon V. I think you and I both don't really like this card, but can you kind of make the case for Lumineon in Gardevoir?
Make the case for Lumineon.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the Lumineon goes really well with playing only 2 bosses orders. And the Palpad. These kind of like shifts in the deck's design make a lot of sense together. And let you bosses orders on turn 3 when it's really important. Maybe your opponent benched 1 Frigibax. Maybe they have 1 Lugia and you're having an insane turn. And it's just really important to be able to have the boss. This lets you do that. Sometimes there's times where if you boss, it just doesn't matter that you have Lumineon on your board. You're just gonna win.
Yeah.
And again, it enables Forest Sealstone. So if you're going along with that engine, again, all these cards make a lot of sense together. If you look at Tord's list, all these cards work together well. And it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Like literally the only reason not to play this is you're putting 2 prizes on your board and like it's bad to start. But I guess there is something to be said about maybe there's turns where, like if you don't boss, you don't research, you don't Iono, you're gonna lose anyway. So like this card just gives you a fighting chance in a lot of matchups. Like I don't hate it. I just personally like don't play it. Okay, so sticking with the synergies of all these cards, let's talk about Forest Sealstone next. Obviously this card is super good. You can pick any card out of your deck, but the drawback is you need to put a 2 prizer on your bench. So how do you see Forest Sealstone kind of fitting into Gardevoir?
All right, I feel like this makes sense with Lumineon. I think something that's important to consider is you'll think, oh, I can put my Sealstone on Zacian, but you actually never want to have Zacian on your board. In most matchups, but most of the time the Zacian just comes in on that last turn. You load all your energies on it and you take your last prize. So you don't really want to have it down as an early liability, which makes Forest Sealstone as a consistency card make less sense to me. Because again, sometimes you're just going to have Forest Sealstone and no V Pokemon and you're going to be like, wow, this card does nothing. So that's why I don't like it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts maybe if you're going to play Forest, like maybe in like I like the Australian list, like playing more Collapse Stadium in your deck? Like I think if you play maybe like 2 Collapse in a vacuum, like I can see it. Because Collapse is like strong just in general. So if you're adding more, like let's say you're playing like a 2 Collapse build, do you think it makes sense then to index towards like a Forest Sealstones in your deck?
Yeah, definitely. I think that would make more sense to play those cards together. Yeah, I think even maybe tossing a second Collapse into Towards list could be really good to kind of get these liabilities off your board after you use Forest Sealstone. Yeah, those cards would make a lot of sense together for sure.
Yeah. Next, I want to talk about the Temple of Sinnoh. So this card I think is really only super strong in one matchup, but like it dramatically increases your win rate in that specific matchup. So can you kind of explain like why Temple is so good against Lugia?
Yeah, so against Lugia, you're always going to fall behind. If you go first, hopefully you only fall behind 1 or 2 prize cards. But if you go second, you can start falling behind 2, even 3 prize cards. And this really just lets you always have a chance in the game. At the end of the game, you can always set up the attacker, Iono, Temple of Sinnoh, knock them out. It's very possible that their 2 cards are just going to suck and they're going to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in games. I find kind of the big like determining factor of the Lugia Gardevoir matchup is whether you get that big turn 3 reversal Guardy 5 energy knockout. That's like the big. If you get that, you're probably winning. If you don't get that, you're probably losing. And then this lets you come back if you do miss that.
Yeah, I also find like in a Lugia matchup, this enables you to attack with Gardevoir EX late game, because if you do attack with Shiny Arcana at the end of the game when they're at 1 or 2 prizes, they can actually just attack with Archeops. And if you're facing a single strike version, if you put Temple, they're allowed to Primal Turbo single strikes to their Archeops. So just this card is just super strong. Like Ionoing someone to 1 or 2 is like super strong. Like Lugia like is gonna have trouble drawing out of that. So yeah, I think this is a really good card. I would personally play it. I just think Lugia is always going to hover around 10 to 15% meta share. And I just think having this card in your deck like just turns it into a very favorable matchup for you. Cool.
I didn't know that you can put single strikes on your Archeops.
Yeah.
You can do that?
Yeah.
Can you attach them from hand
hand.
Only from your deck?
Only from your deck.
Not from hand.
Yeah.
But from the deck. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it was really big like last format. I used to play Lugia a lot, obviously, so I used to come up a lot. Cool. Okay, so moving on. I want to talk about how Greninja and Mew EX kind of work together or against each other. Because I think Greninja is like obviously like a staple in Gardevoir. I know you and I had a really great discussion like offline about this of how like maybe do you even play Greninja anymore? Like do you need to bench Manaphy every time you put Greninja down? So can you kind of explain the dynamic that Mew EX is kind of introduced to the format now?
Yeah, okay. So I think Mew EX can obviously fit into any deck, but especially Lugia is where I'm thinking Mew EX is going. And it really puts a lot of pressure on your Greninja. Your Greninja is already somewhat of a liability as far as like Mawile, and now there's the second pressure factor on your Greninja, which is Mew. So now against Lugia, like on my second turn of the game, do I have to put down Manaphy and my Greninja in case they have boss? It's like this. It's like a debate, and it really sucks because you really want those bench spaces to Mirage Step, set up your board. So then the other option is you don't put down your Greninja at all, which also hurts because, again, that turn 3 reversal Guardy is so important, and you need 5 Psychics in the discard, and this really helps you get there. So those are kind of the things to think about when you're trying to play around Mew, is how bad do I need energies in the discard? Can I afford to have Manaphy on my board? And then also maybe, like, how likely is it that they'll actually have a Mew EX and a boss this turn?
Yeah. I'd agree with all of that. So I think one call against Lugia, it's really hard for them to play boss turn 2, especially when they go first. Like they need to get the Archeops in the discard. Like, they need Burnett, they need research. If they're Ultra Balling double Archeops, like you're probably gonna lose anyways. So I think another thing too is like if you bench it early, like you can look for your collapse later on. Like you might just collapse it. So honestly, the more we've been talking, like the more I'm like maybe you do have to just start playing double collapse in Gardevoir. It just seems super strong. And like just another point you touched on, how it's susceptible to getting like Mawile or like blocked Snorlax. I didn't include Penny or Switch in my cards to consider, but do you think going into a large tournament like a regional, like do you think it's worth it to have an out to Mawile, either the Penny or the Switch?
Yeah, I think it fluctuates. But I think right now, after the Charizard deck did well in the Latin America regional. I'm not sure what it was,
Yeah, in
but
Brazil.
there was a Mawile, Brazil, yeah. There was a Mawile deck a Mawile in the Charizard deck, and that's really concerning. So I am looking at putting like a switch or a penny or an escape rope in my deck. It's hard. You really just have to gauge how often you think you'll play against it. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think if you play Palpa, like Penny makes sense too, since you can reuse it or just discard it early. But honestly, like I just find like it doesn't have much utility as a card, like Switch or Penny. Like if you're not facing it Mawile, it's almost like a dead spot.
Yeah, the one bit of utility that Switch also gets is in matchups where you're spamming Cresselia, especially in Mirror, your energies can tend to get trapped on the board. But if you have Switch, you can switch into like your Gardevoir EX, retreat the energies off, and then you can get those damage counters on your board without stranding your psychic energies.
Yeah,
so that's like a small utility.
Yeah.
It comes up sometimes, not super often though.
Yeah, it's a good call out actually. Cool. And like, yeah, we're gonna talk about the mirror after. Like, it's super complicated, so we can discuss it.
Yeah.
So cool. So we've gone over
sure.
kind of like all the cards in the deck and the builds. So let's move into the matchups. I've kind of made this spread, kind of like in my opinion. So for the good matchups, I put Miraidon, I put DT Mew, I put both Lugia versions, assuming you're playing Temple of Sinnoh. If you're not playing Temple, I'd actually say it's probably slightly unfavorable. I think Meloetta Mew is like slightly favorable. I put Lost Tina and Lost Kyogre in 50-50 just because I think they're slower to get the Sableye. I put Charizard at 50-50. That might seem like off since Charizard's a dark type, but we can discuss like why you actually trade pretty well with them. For unfavorable, I put Turbo Lost Zone. I just think they get to Sableye super quick, which is super annoying for your deck. And for the bad matchups, I just put Chien-Pao and Rapid Strike. So yeah, let's just dive into the matchups here. Let's start with Lugia. So we've kind of discussed Temple already. And some of the things you can do, but can you give like an in-depth what you're trying to do versus Lugia and maybe some things to try and avoid?
Yeah, I think something to avoid is putting down Zacian early. You can really fall behind if they just kill your Guardian and then kill your Zacian, and even if you have Temple, you can still just be too far behind at that point. I think what you're really trying to do is you're trying to, whether you go first or second, you're trying to Mirage Step on turn 2, and then go for a big reversal Guardy, knock out their Lugia. And knocking out their Lugia is really important, not just because of the prize cards, but in the late game when you do go for the Temple Iono, if they have a Lugia in play, they can just attack with it and discard the Temple. But if they don't have a Lugia in play, sometimes that Temple can even buy you like 2 turns, which is incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really just you go Mirage Step, then on your next turn you got to take a big KO, and then just keep following up with KOs with Shining Arcana. And if your Gardevoir EX dies, don't put down another one until you have to. Yeah.
Yeah. Just another call, I think I mentioned this earlier, is like late in the game when you do Iono, like you actually want to attack with Gardevoir EX, especially against colorless, since they're going to have Snorlax or Archeops to take prizes. And maybe a question from you, from the Lugia side, do you think it's ever worth it to bench 2 Lugia, so late game you're a little bit more protected against that Temple Iono play?
I thought about this for a while. I don't think so. So. Because I think if you're the Lugia player and you ever bench like 3 2-prizers, or if the Gardevoir player ever just gets to like kill 3 2-prizers, you're just gonna lose. Like, it doesn't matter if there's Temple Iono. The whole reason that this matchup is kind of difficult from the Gardevoir side is that you can't just win in 3 turns. In a lot of matchups, you just get to like fall behind and then win in 3 turns, and it's great. But yeah, I think it's really important that as the Lugia player, you don't let your opponent win in 3 turns.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask you is there ever scenarios or a strategy in a game where you're looking to just boss their Archeops? Like, is there games where you think it's worth it to take that line, like ignore what's in the active and just go after the Archeops to try and stop off their energy acceleration?
Sometimes it comes up. When they put down 1 Archeops, I almost always kill it.
Yeah.
But I think if they have 2, usually they'll have energies in play already, and it's just not worth going for. You just want to kill. I think you just want to kill what's in front of you. Play Iono, draw cards. And yeah, I actually don't look to kill the Archeops very often in this.
Yeah, neither do I.
Matchup, no.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask about that. Cool. And then one more call out I was thinking about too is a lot of times Lugia needs to bench Lumineon to set up. So obviously that's a 2-prize liability. And we know Lugia also plays Collapse. So are you ever looking to, like maybe in the mid game or even the early game, are you looking to Collapse early so that you can block Lugia from using it themselves?
Yes. And again, this is another reason why double collapse would be so good. Because yeah, when you collapse, they can't. They don't have the vacuum, they don't have the worker, they can't make that play. So yeah, getting down a collapse stadium, maybe if they have like 4 Pokemon and one of them's the Lumineon, that's amazing. It blocks it. They can Tempest Dive and remove it or just replace it themselves, but it guarantees you one more turn of that fish being there,
Yeah.
which is really important. Sometimes you're also looking for opportunities where maybe you can boss in the fish so that they have less time to collapse it away, or maybe penny it up. They could do that too.
Yeah.
And then also something that I didn't point out yet, but sometimes you don't want to kill the Eviltal when it's attacking you, because the best way to kill the Eviltal is when they're low on prizes. You kill the Eviltal with Gardevoir EX and Temple and Iono.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the Gardevoir is the bulkiest attacker, you want to combo it with Temple Iono. But if they have like a Tyranitar in the active, it's really bad to just like attack for 190 into the Tyranitar. So getting that extra value of actually taking a knockout there is really good.
Yeah, well. I think there's another call too about when we were talking about the collapse is like once you get to the mid or late game, like you're gonna draw a boss. Like it's almost impossible to miss. Like you're gonna probably like refine it like 3 times, Arcana a couple times. So yeah, I think that's a great call about the Eviltal too. Just one more thing before I move on. If they bench their Eviltal and like don't attack with it, are you ever looking to boss it up against single strike Lugia?
Almost never. If there's a 2-prize, I find, okay, so the way I think about it is if there's a 2-prizer in front of me, I could kill the 2-prizer and then kill the Eviltal.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could kill the Eviltal and then the 2-prizer. And there's just not much of a difference to me. So I feel like usually I would just rather focus on setting up my board, maybe playing an Iono, drawing more cards. Usually I usually wouldn't look to kill the Eviltal.
Cool. No, I think that was great. Yeah, so that was a really great dive into Lugia. So let's move on to Miraidon next. I don't think we'd spend a lot of time with it. Like I think this matchup's like very good. So do you mind just giving us a quick overview of why this matchup's so good?
Yeah. As a common theme for Gardevoir is you win in 3 turns. It's great. You can fall behind 2, even 3 prize cards sometimes. And then you come back, you spam Iono, you attack with Shining Arcana as often as you can. And the prize trade's very favorable. The only thing that's scary is path, so you want to save your stadium bumps. That's pretty important. Otherwise, it's all pretty intuitive. Mirage Step is amazing as well in just ensuring a consistent setup. And something else to call out is sometimes the Raichu KO on your Gardevoir seems scary, but in reality, it's very difficult for them to actually get the six energies, right? Yeah, 6 energies and a boss. It's actually really hard for them to do when you're killing their guy every turn. And then even if they get it off, if like say they do that and they go down to like 1 or 2 prize cards, you Iono, you attack, and they have no energy in play.
Yeah.
So I'm generally not very worried about getting Raichu.
I agree. I think another call out too is if you're attacking with a Shining Arcana Gardevoir, you probably have like 6+ energies on it. Like if your Gardevoir gets bossed, like you don't even have to put another one into play because you already have the thing ready to attack again. So like let's say I'm playing against Miraidon, they're at 4 prizes and they boss my Gardevoir. I'm just not going to evolve into an EX on the following turn, force them to take a single prize knockout, and then again on my last turn, then I evolve to the EX and finish the game. So I don't think we have to spend much more time on this. I think it's a pretty straightforward matchup. Just trade favorably with Arcana. Cool, so let's move on to Mew VMAX. Let's spend a little bit more time talking about the fusion builds. I think that's more popular. I personally think this matchup's pretty good. So can you kind of explain how you think it normally goes and what to look out for?
Right. So this matchup plays out similar to Miraidon, but it's a bit harder. It's a bit different. They have, obviously, Pokemon that attack that aren't worth 2 prizes. So you're not going to be just KOing 3 2-prizers every time. But usually you are going to be looking to win in 3 turns. This could mean killing 3 2-prizers. This could mean killing like a 1-prizer, then a VMAX, then a 2-prizer. But if you can get that 3-turn prize mapping, it's really good. And the similar theme where you Mirage Step, you set up, you take 2 turns off, they can go up 2 prize cards, it's okay. And then you just Shining Arcana, attack with it over and over again. This matchup is a bit more scary because I actually feel like it's more likely for them to get like a quadruple tablet boss knockout on your Gardevoir than it is for Miraidon to Raichu you. So I am scared of that. Watch their power tablets. Consider they might also have a cleansing gloves.
Yep.
So if they're down one tablet, it doesn't mean they can't one-shot you. They could have a cleansing gloves. Yeah, look for that. Look for their tablets, their gloves. Look to see if the pressure's on your Gardevoir EX or if the pressure's off. That's something I would look for.
Yeah, so I put here as one of the notes, like look for safe opportunities to attack with Gardevoir. So if you do see two tablets in discard, for example, like Gardevoir is a great attacker to knock out a Genesect, because then they actually can't knock it out back. And normally the way you finish the game is you save Zacian for the very end. You just 9 energy, knock out Mew. But yeah, it's like Rowan's saying, this is just like a matchup where you just look for the favorable prize trade. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to add on that. Cool, so let's move on to Lost Tina. So this is a pretty popular deck. I think this matchup's like kind of contested back and forth. It plays a little different than playing against just a normal Lost Box deck, because not only do they have Sableye, Giratina can also threaten knockouts on your Gardevoir EX. So what do you look for when you're facing against the Giratina deck?
Their deck is very fragile. So I usually look for, I count their Colruses, I count their switch cards. That just kind of helps me gauge how effective my Ionos are going to be. If they're down 3-4 Colrus, well, they're not really going to be gaining many cards off Iono. I look for water energies. That's a big thing to look for, because Manaphy can actually be a huge liability against these Lost Zone decks. So if they don't play Greninja, it's really nice. You can save the 70 HP Pokemon, save your board space for some bulkier Pokemon, or just no Pokemon. That's something I definitely look for. Attack with Cresselia a lot. Kill their Sableyes. If they ever attack with Cram, it's so nice to just leave the Cram in the active, Cresselia the bench, play an Iono. It's really hard for them to deal with. It costs them a lot of switch cards to get out of the Cram into a Sableye, maybe.
Yeah, I've also found that Tina is like even more susceptible than normal Lost Zone to Iono spam. Like one of their strategies, they're going to Rock Sand Path like other decks, but their deck is actually really bad against Iono themselves, so just look to spam as much as possible. And also, like, target Giratinas with boss's orders when you can. If you force them to bench 2 Giratinas, like, those are 4 prizes for free that you can kind of get. So, like, I think a normal prize mapping might be, like, Cresselia on a, like, Comfy, Cresselia, Sableye, and then just Giratina knockout. So, I think that's what you should be looking to do. Cool.
I think one other thing I want to call out that is really scary is when you do go for those big Shining Arcanas, you can leave yourself susceptible to a 2 prize turn from a Sableye. Like the Sableye could, like if you put like 100 damage counters on your Gardevoir, then they can go 4 on the Gardevoir, 8 on a Kirlia, and that's a really damaging attack for them to use. So try to avoid that. Try to generate energies on your Shining Arcanas, whether it's reversal energy or you're using Cresselia to generate some energies without damage. That's really important to set that up.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, just like stopping their Sableye from trading 2 for 1 is just like massive with this deck. Cool. And then just one final call I want to make is if your opponent's had 2 prize cards and you're not about to win, like look to collapse your Gardevoir EX out of play, just so they can't boss and Star Requiem you. Yeah. Cool. So then let's move on then to normal Lost Box. So we can talk about Kyogre and Turbo, but I think it's a similar approach to both. I would say this matchup's a little uncomfortable to play against, mainly because of how fast they get Sableye, but can you kind of explain what you can do to try and win this matchup?
Yeah, so generally, I'm counting Lost Box's resources a lot. I'm counting, they're not really going to be killing my Gardevoir EX, so they're going to need to attack probably 6 times, maybe 5 if they get some good Sableyes, but that means I'm counting their Colruses, I'm counting their switch cards, I'm trying to drain their resources, spam my Iono, force them to use these resources, and especially looking to hit Ionos when maybe they have several Sableyes or several Psychic Energies in the discard. Make it as difficult as possible for them to get these attacks off. And along with that, you want to attack with Cresselia. Again, if you can strand Cramorant in the active and Cresselia the bench, combo that with Iono, really powerful, cost them a lot of resources to get out of and use a more relevant attack. What else? Oh yeah, Super Rod Echoing Horn targets into the deck. That's a good one. I've lost a few times to an Echoing Horn on a little guy for game. Yep. And then that's because at the end of the game, you want to build your board to a place where you actually don't have any Pokemon that can be Sableyed. So usually, like I set up my Kirlias, and then I kind of just let them die and I don't put down new Ralts, so that at the end of the game, my board looks something like maybe a Gardevoir EX, maybe another Gardevoir EX. Yeah, the ideal board.
Yeah.
Another Gardevoir EX, the Shiny Arcana. Greninja is a Pokemon I often have down, has 130, so it doesn't die.
Yeah.
To Sableye. Zacian is a Pokemon I have a lot down.
Yeah.
And then you really just force them to deal with this. It usually buys you a turn.
Yeah, so I think a couple calls there. One thing just to be careful of is a lot of Lost Zone decks do play Drapion V, so check if they've played their Mirage Gates or not, if that's a possible play. And it kind of looks scary when you get to a board with like no Kirlias or Arcanas because you're not drawing cards, but like once you get to the late game, it's like you don't really need to draw cards. Like you're just trading like favorably. And then if you're going to put Zacian in, just make sure their Dragonites like in the Lost Zone are like not able to attack. But yeah, if you can get to this board, like I even put as one of the points here, is like you can try and force a 7 prize game. So if you can get like 2 Gardevoir EXs in play, and then when your opponents are like 1 prize, and you can super out away all your like Ralts, like your Mew, whatever nonsense is in the discard, you can make it really hard for your opponent to take that very last prize. Since they don't have anything efficient to attack Gardevoir. Like if they're attacking you with Cram or Sableye, that's 3 attacks. If they want to put a Dragonite to try and like chip at this, like then you can just Pensation. So I think if you ever get to this board against Lost Zone, especially when you're combining with Iono, like I actually think you're going to win the game.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice. Now let's move on to the Chien-Pao matchup. This is my favorite deck. I think that this is the deck's worst matchup. Like it's really, really hard to beat this deck.
So bad.
Yeah. So I guess I'll maybe take the lead on this one. So the reason it's bad for Gardevoir is they're just trading so favorably with you. Because normally what you're doing as Gardevoir is you're winning the prize trade. But Chien-Pao is almost always going to take a prize lead on you. And even though you can knock out Chien-Pao with your own Shiny Arcana Gardevoirs, like they can just knock you out even with like Frigibacks or with Greninja or with Baxcalibur. So they're trading 1-to-1 with you. And you have a 2 prize liability on your bench in the Gardevoir EX, and Chien-Pao doesn't. And they also have the canceling clone on your Manaphy play, where they can just knock out 2 Kirlias or Kirlia and Arcana, and your draw engine just like goes away. So there's almost no way to manipulate the prize trade in this matchup in your favor. Like they're going to be in the driver's seat every time when it comes to that. So that being said, there's a couple things you can try and do to win this matchup. So if you go first and you can get a turn 2 Cresselia on their only Bidoof, like go for it. Like the way Chien-Pao loses is if you Iono them and they don't have a way to drop cards in play. Because like I'm saying, they do need to cross switcher at the end, like pull off that canceling clone play. That requires drawing a lot of cards. So if you can like get rid of their Bibarel, like combo Iono with like getting rid of their Pokestop, like you have a chance. So sometimes when I play this matchup, like I would even look to boss their Bibarel. Like it might feel wrong to not take out their Chien-Pao as it's attacking you, but you need to eventually win this game by getting an Iono to stick. So yeah, I think the matchup's obviously, I'd say probably it's like a 30-70. But if you can take out the Bibarel, like it's worse. You think it's worse? Okay,
it's worse. It's worse.
Okay, the matchup's like a 20-80 maybe.
Yeah, 2080, it's so bad. Oh my
yeah, if you can get Iono to stick without a Bibarel, like that's how you're winning the game. Otherwise, like Chien-Pao is just gonna roll you every single time. And if they take 2 prizes before you take 1, like it's even worse. Like there's 0 way to win.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Basically, yeah. I mean, everything you said was great. It's all right. When they turn 2 Greninja clone you, the game like just ends.
Yeah.
You can't. It's not even just the prize trade. Your board is crippled. You have a Manaphy in the active. You have like no Kirlias, especially if they set up the Bibarel that turn. Because once the Bidoof becomes Bibarel, you can't Cresselia snipe it, which just makes everything worse. Basically, your only chance is Cresselia snipe the Bidoof, and then hope an Iono sticks at some point. But usually, if there's no Bibarel, it will stick.
Yeah.
So if you can get to the point where there is no Bibarel, then you have a chance. But if there's a Bibarel, if there's a Baxcalibur, if they're drawing cards, you're just going to lose.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. So and also it might be tempting to target down their Baxcalibur, but like honestly, like don't. Just focus on the Bibarel. Cool.
Yeah,
I don't think we need to spend much more time on that. Okay, so let's move on to Rapid Strike. This is the other matchup I put as bad. I don't think it's as bad as Chien-Pao. And I also think like this deck requires your opponent to have like perfect play to actually make the matchup favorable. So why don't you explain some plays you can make or boards you can work towards to help you win this matchup?
Yes. Okay. This is somewhat similar to the Lost Box matchup in the way that they place a lot of damage counters and they pressure your Kirlias a lot. So it's really important to get your Kirlias evolved and then not put down new ones to give them more Yoga Loop targets. And along with that, Manaphy is actually like a prime Yoga Loop target. So if they don't have an Urshifu on their board, just don't put down Manaphy.
Yeah.
And then if they do put down the Urshifu, yes, you can look to put down Manaphy, but even better than that is to just look to boss in that Urshifu and kill it with Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX is actually one of your best attackers in this matchup, just because it has so much HP and it doesn't give them an opportunity to Yoga Loop. Again, this is one of the reasons why I really like playing 3 boss, and this is another place where playing Lumineon would make a lot of sense, because getting that KO on the Urshifu is really important, so you don't have to put down Manaphy. And Lumineon actually isn't that much of a liability in this matchup. Yeah, and then, one other thing to look for is to Cresselia their Octillery. If you can Cresselia their Octillery, their deck gets like really crippled.
Yeah.
Or you can just boss kill it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I put again like super odd echoing horn targets just in case. Like if they can't pull off a Yoga Loop turn, like you will not lose. Like they actually just don't trade well with you at all. So like I kind of put this ideal late game board. Obviously this is like a dream board. This is very hard to get towards. Like even if you just have like one Arcanine, like one Gardevoir EX, like if there's no Yoga Loop target in play, you trade really well. Like Gardevoir EX doing 190, even if you're two-shotting Inteleon, like you're trading 2 for 3. Actually, you're trading even better because they don't even do 310 and 2 attacks. Also, again, I mean, we're just like the biggest collapsed enjoyers, but collapsed away liabilities that can get Yoga Loop. And like Rowan's saying, like if they don't bench, if they're not threatening Urshifu, like do not put Manaphy on your board, because then they can Yoga Loop and evolve in the same turn. So it seems counterintuitive. You're playing as an Urshifu deck to not bench Manaphy, but it actually loses you the game more often than it helps you. So there are spots where you can maybe bench it, but like they're far and few between. Cool. So then let's move on to Mirror. So I actually think the Mirror is like super intricate and interesting. There's so many things going on. I think I played a really great game against you at a League Cup a while ago. You were showing me a lot of things that I wasn't even considering in the matchup. So why don't you take the reins here? Explain what you're looking for when you're playing a Gardevoir Mirror.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so this one's really complicated. There's a lot of ideas you can look for and on different levels you can play at. Generally, I like Mirage stepping in this matchup. Your draw power is going to be really important to set up some of the plays we're about to talk about. And sometimes it's even more important than falling behind a prize. Because Reversal Energy is such a powerful card that being behind one prize is almost not even a disadvantage.
Yeah, I find it's an advantage actually to go behind a prize.
Yeah, it gives you the control of when to reversal kill their Gardevoir EX. And that's really what this matchup swings on, is if and when someone's Gardevoir EX gets reversal bossed. And with that, the best way to prevent that is with a Collapse Stadium. So your Collapse Stadium is really important, not only to get rid of your own Gardevoir EX, but there are times where you can use your Collapse Stadium to force your opponent, like to make it more difficult for your opponent to do it. You know, they got to find that vacuum collapsed play or worker collapsed play. And a lot of people aren't thinking of that, so they're not looking to conserve their lost vacuum or their worker, and you can just kind of slap down your collapse and they can't get rid of it. But yeah, and then along with that, when you boss KO their Gardevoir EX, you leave yourself open to a return boss. So thinking of that, and then those are kind of the pivotal turns. But like from turn to turn, if you're not making a big play like that, you just want to Cresselia, kill a Kirlia, pressure their draw engine, play an Iono. Don't let them have a 14-card hand to make these big plays.
I think I think most players recognize that it turns into a bit of a Cresselia war early. But one of the things to be really cognizant of is that when you're using Cresselia and your opponent's using Cresselia, like the energies normally get stuck on the board, and it actually becomes like extremely difficult to get enough to use Shining Arcana for a knockout. So like you're saying, like Collapse can also be used to like put energy in your discard when you want to go for a big play. And just another call out is, if you can, like always promote like a Gardevoir or a Kirlia and then retreat after a knockout to get more energy in your discard, so you can keep spamming the Cresselia play while leaving energy in your discard. Other than that, I'm trying to think if there's anything we're missing here. And just another call it is, Iono is really good in the mirror, because like as you're trading with the Cresselias back and forth, like eventually the Kirlias and the Arcanas start going down, and your opponent or even yourself are going to be down to like 1 or 2 like draw abilities every turn. So Iono gets like progressively powerful like throughout the game.
Yeah, and this isn't a matchup where I limit my Ralts' coming back down. I want a Super Rod and put my Ralts back down as often as possible. Set up as many Gardevoirs as possible. Even to like my second last turn, I'm putting down new Ralts.
Yeah. I think Mirage Step is
drawing cards,
super good in this matchup.
Yeah, because then you don't have to Super Rod every time.
Yeah.
You just bench new Ralts.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So I think this matchup's really intricate. I actually find it quite enjoyable. I think it's pretty fun. It's definitely a super skill-based matchup, and there's lots to consider when you're playing this one. I just realized I forgot to make a slide for Charizard EX, so why don't we just talk about that matchup real quick? So I think the matchup's 50-50. It kind of reminds me of the Lugia matchup where you need big reversal turns with Gardevoir, and you do want to look to collapse away your Gardevoir near the end just so they can't trade 2 for 2, but can you kind of give a quick explanation of what you would do versus the Charizard matchup?
Yeah, so I think similar to Lugia, you want to do Mirage Step on turn 2, set up your board. It's okay, you're going to fall behind a prize or two, but you're going to come back. So then on your turn 3, ideally, it's really important to get this turn 3. You need one more energy. One more energy? Yeah, one more energy. So you need 6 Psychics and the reversal on turn 3, knock out the Charizard. And it puts your opponent in a really tough spot because they probably want to kill your Gardevoir EX, but if they boss your Gardevoir EX, the Shining Arcana is staring them down. It's a huge threat, so they can't really do that. And then you can kind of try and turn that to your advantage and get ahead in the prize trade by making them kill these 1-prizers. Yeah. And then maybe once they're at like 3 prizes, look to collapse away your Gardevoir. So they can't boss that in.
Yeah, just another call out is if you boss their Pidgeot, it actually becomes really hard for them to like boss. That's like the lifeblood of their deck. So I think as people test against Charizard more, and more people are going to figure that out, and the deck's going to get a little less powerful. But even early game, like if you can Cresselia, like turn 2, start knocking out Pidgeys, that's good. Because one thing you can do is like if you take the first prize, even if it's a single prize, like they're going to have to bench a Charmander or something eventually, so you can just knock it out again with like Cresselia or something. So yes, you're weak to Dark, but you're trading favorably, and there's like you're more consistent. Like you're just drawing more cards than they are. So I think the matchup's fine. If I tested it more, I might even shift it to favorable. But for now, I'm going to leave it at 50-50.
Yeah, this may even be a matchup where you don't need to Mirage Step. Like if your turn 1's really strong and your turn 2 looks really strong, and you can actually get a Cresselia attack off on turn 2, this is probably a matchup where I would really want to go for that because I think it would set you up really well to only need 2 big KOs. You know, big KO with Arcana, Cresselia, another guy, and then Zacian comes in, closes out the game.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cool, so let's just go over some closing thoughts here. I've just kind of written some like the strengths and weaknesses at a high level that we've kind of like discussed. So on the strength side, I just put this deck has a super high damage output. We keep talking about how you can like one-shot almost everything with Arcana or with Zacian. And Arcana is just such an efficient single prize attacker. There's no other card in the game that does as much damage as it does and only gives 1 prize. This deck has a lot of skill expression and tons of options. There's so many decision trees with this deck since you're making so many decisions, so many refinements, so many trades. It's just called refinement. Shining Arcana. Same thing. So I think this is a really great deck, especially in League Cups, or if you consider yourself a stronger player, you can match this deck. You win a lot of games just by playing really good Pokemon. And do you want to kind of go over some of the weaknesses of the deck and like why you maybe wouldn't take this to a tournament?
Okay, so Chien-Pao's #1 weakness for sure. Lost box decks are hard to play against, especially in time. It's really hard to close out 3 games. You got to know when to scoop, like how many. I'm really looking to scoop when I'm 2 or 3. If I'm 3 prizes behind, I'm scooping. 2, I'm maybe staying in there if I think they've expended a lot of resources. But really, you're hoping to only be 1 prize behind against these Lost Zone decks. So if you're 3 prizes behind, scoop it up, go to the next one. Similar against like Rapid Strike decks, sometimes those take a while to play out. You can scoop it up if all your Kirlias get wiped. And there's a lot of opportunity to make mistakes. This deck is like the peak of sequencing in Pokemon, in my opinion. You know, there's a lot of, you need to optimally thin your deck. You got to play your level balls, pull out your Manaphy, play your Fog Crystals, pull out your Psychic Energies. But then also sometimes you don't actually want to do that. And again, like with Iono, there's cards on the bottom. You have to think about that as well. So it's really probably the most difficult deck to optimize your sequencing with. So I would say that's a weakness.
Actually, let's dive into that more. Actually, I kind of wish I made like a slide for that. So, I think sequencing, like, it's not just a Gardevoir thing, but some of the things you called out that I think are really interesting. So, like Iono, for example, like, let's say I'm trying to draw like a boss to win the game, and my opponent Ionos me, and I didn't have a boss in my old hand. You actually don't want to like play any like search cards within your deck because you know that the bosses are more likely towards the top. So if you're going to Refinement or Arcana, don't do that. Or like another scenario, like you're saying, like Fog Crystal, it's like if I need like to naturally draw an energy because I need to discard some more, you actually want to wait to play your Fog Crystals because you want to just naturally draw energy while they're still in your deck. So always be asking yourself, like, what am I trying to accomplish right now? And be like, is leaving cards in my deck or is shuffling my deck advantageous to me right now?
Yeah, no, that's huge. I think like that's totally how I'm thinking while I'm playing through my turn. I'm thinking, all right, this turn I need my Shining Arcana 5 Psychic reversal play. Maybe I only have 2 Psychics in my discard, so I'm gonna wait on this Fog Crystal. I need to draw more Psychic energies and then use the Fog Crystal to get the last one. Keep my deck saturated with Psychic energy.
Yeah. I think I saw a really cool play. I forgot who I was discussing with, but apparently like Tord one time, like he needed to Arcana into energy and he had one in his hand. So what he did was he Iono'd his hand away and then he just played like a level ball to shuffle his deck to like give it a chance to come to the top. So like there's scenarios like that where like you can manipulate where the cards are, not like where the cards are in the deck, but like you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
right?
like you're not stacking your deck, but you're optimizing
of drawing.
Yeah, you're optimizing your chances.
Yeah.
Yes, and you'll see like over time as you become more adept at those like thinning, sequencing, optimizing your deck kind of things, you'll see yourself get lucky more often. But you're not actually getting lucky, you're just maximizing your percentage to hit whatever you need.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, you're manipulating luck. You're making luck go in your favor. So, yeah, I think that's a really great call out. Cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up here?
No, that was great. We talked about a lot of like in-depth things. That was cool.
Yeah, no, I thought this was really great. Like, I really appreciate you coming on. You're one of the best Gardevoir players, I think. Hopefully, this was helpful for everyone watching on how to play the matchups or just the deck in general. Yeah, like just to close out, Rowan, like thanks again for coming on to the show. I'm gonna give you a chance to plug yourself, where to find you, anything you want to say. Like, go ahead.
Sure. Can I give a shout out to my sponsor, Game Time Collectibles? Some great guys there. Love their support, and all the locals that play there as well. All the locals in the GTA in general. We're super competitive. Tons of great players. Shout out to them for over the years, just like giving me a place to improve as a player. It's been really nice. And you can find me on Twitter at Rowan_Stavenow.
Cool, great. For myself, you can find me on Twitter at Ciaran_TCG, obviously on YouTube at CiaranTCG. And if you have any questions for us, suggestions, what videos you want to see next, please put them in the comments or message me either on Twitter or on YouTube. I will do my best to respond. But other than that, thanks for watching and good luck with all your Gardevoir games out there.